what Christ says, he says he came to fulfill the law.
Right.
And of course, he is the law. He is the new covenant.
Exactly.
Christ is the heart of it all.
Mm-hmm.
He is truth incarnate, like we've talked about. And really, Terry, I think this gospel passage is the gospel passage for our time, for this Lenten season, for this year 2024. We need to read this gospel and understand what Christ is saying.
Yeah.
Because we're hearing from many in the church and from many in the world, the laws are changing. The truth has changed.
Oh, geez.
The commandments need to be adjusted to fit the great mind of the 21st century. And all those 20 centuries before us, they just didn't have it right. We will finally awaken to what the truth is that the church needs to proclaim. That's simply, again, Terry,
rubbish.
Not what Jesus says in this passage. He says, not the smallest letter of the smallest part of a letter will pass from the law. Mm-hmm. That's beautifully, he talks about his own language.
Right.
Different than English. We might say, what does he mean, a small part of a letter? Well, I guess the closest we would have is the dot over a lowercase I, or the cross of a T.
Right.
Those would be equivalent to, from what I understand, the jots and tittle. That's what that is speaking of, is the tiniest parts of the law. Christ is telling us that these things do not change. And we're being told by many in the church with great pride, really. Many are saying, finally, the church is changing her teaching, and isn't this wonderful? But the church, the bride of Christ, is called to look to Christ himself and to look to what he says. And he says at the end of this gospel passage, if it wasn't strong enough already, the law is not going to change. Not the smallest part of a letter will pass from the law until all things have taken place. But then he goes on to say, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do so will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. We need to really pray about and understand what is Christ saying, because we see it happening in the world today and in the church. The attempt to say, the commandments have changed, the law has changed. We didn't understand the scriptures. We've misinterpreted. One thing for those who believe that message, which I think is very dangerous, because it contradicts Jesus Christ, but many are believing it anyway. But one test I would give is it making the gospel, is it making living the way of Jesus Christ more challenging or easier? And to me, I think we need to ask ourselves, the death of Christ was not easy. He died on the cross in the scourging at the pillar. All of his suffering was excruciating. It was devastating for him in his human body. God and man, he suffered deeply. And so I mention that because, in the Lenten season, at the end of Lent, Holy Week, we will remember the passion of the Lord. Many people are praying the stations of the cross during this Lenten season, which is beautiful. We need to be aware how deep his suffering was. And what to me that illustrates is how important the truth is that he's proclaiming.
Yeah.
And to determine that, oh, we've misunderstood for 2,000 years and we've got a better understanding. The fact that it's easier, to me, diminishes and casts a shadow on the tremendous loving sacrifice of Christ that we need to be very careful about. And I think that, in a sense, that's what he's telling us. Those who teach that these commandments have been changed and teach others to follow this pathway will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. I think that's very significant. And I think we all have to pay attention to that, whatever our role in the church. For me as a bishop, I, with fear and trembling, pay attention to these words from the gospel, from the lips of Christ himself. And people can try to explain it away, but instead of explaining it away, I think we need to just, in humility, embrace it and say, let us live the commandments. I'm reminded again, I mentioned it recently, but it keeps coming back to me in the book of Revelation, where it describes Satan going after the woman. We know is an image of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Satan goes after the woman, but he fails. And so he turns to her children who are living the commandments and keeping the path of the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's what's happening. Satan is going after those who know what Christ said is true, that his commandments, his truth doesn't change. He didn't come to change the law, he came to fulfill it and to help us understand more deeply the great challenge that we face, the wondrous mercy that's always there. But we better pay attention to what Christ said and call the church and her leaders and every leader of whatever capacity in nations or wherever, leaders of families, all of us need to listen to this gospel and be challenged to return to the commandments and to the truth and look for any ways in our human arrogance we have decided to change it.